fifth and final conversation with Reddy has just taken place, and I cannot believe I had the same feeling when I came up towards the end of season one. It's like, what will I do when I don't have my monthly 3-hour conversation with Reddy? I will just have conversations with him without recording. We have gone into some, I'm not even going to say potentially sticky, but sticky topic today because we're recording this on February 24th, which is the day when Russia and Ukraine are bumping up against each other. Um, and we go into that. We speak about violence and how violence actually is not all bad, but that the way that we do violence today, our modern culture, somehow has gotten too far away from us, from our sensory experiences, I think. So prepare for some tankespjärn. Um, and know that in no way are we trying to be disrespectful. Neither me nor Reddy. I think we do play quite seriously with this topic of violence, which is just what is needed. More play. That's what Reddy says. He says, I don't want world peace. I want world play. I'm all for it. So enjoy this, the fifth and final conversation with me and Reddy.
I was just thinking about this whole idea about how people are constantly fighting wars. I think it's kind of connected to what we spoke about, this sense of belonging to a certain place, right? Like this idea that there's something that ties me to the land I was born in, the land of my ancestors, and there's something that, like they bled for our survival and their blood was soaked into the battlefields 1,000 years ago, 1,000,000 years ago, whatever. And, their sacrifice should not be in vain. So we shouldn't give up our sovereignty, our identity, our connection to this land. And that makes me wonder at what cost, right? Because there's this idea that our identity, our culture is somehow tied to the soil, and that soil is worth fighting for, is worth losing lives for, right? So it's kind of goes full circle. Someone fought for this land, so we should not give up this land, and we should fight to get back that land. And, so it just keeps going on and on and on. But from a play perspective, I wonder if we don't really need that reason or excuse to fight. We just love to fight, right? And in the past, like wars were aplenty, like there were wars all the time, right? And I wonder if that was more like a certain attempt at catharsis of this inner violence streak that we all possess. And it somehow wars were used to purge that, to give that innate nature in all of us a way to get out, like, get out and okay, it's done. We fought. All right, the victor goes the spoils, and the rest of us are just going to bide our time and wait for our next turn a few years away, right? So it's almost like a seasonal thing. Every time I start feeling the itch, and then I start picking a fight with someone, and I'm like, all right, I'm just bored, not having fun. And this is one way to bring that adrenaline and that excitement and that enthusiasm. And male perspective, there's that whole aspect of testosterone, right? If you're just living life, doing domestic things and work and routine, mundane stuff, you're not giving that adrenaline, that testosteronic drive. It's it doesn't find a way to come out, right? And that's when you have the Olympics and you have games and you have sports, and like they're supposed to be like a safe outlet for that, that urge to just go out and destroy and wreck things and break faces and, break someone's bones and do all of that. Yeah. So I wonder if we can like find some way where we can play without hurting each other, but at the same time, it's I don't know. It's kind of like the balance between safety and danger. How hard can we play that it's yet not dangerous, and at what point do we stop before it starts getting hit?
And maybe it isn't dangerous, but rather lethal that we should be wary of.
Yeah.
Um, I have done a like complete 180 when it comes to violence. I've written a blog post how violence is never the answer and, all of these things. And then reading Ishmael, the story of B, and then my Ishmael, or re-listening to my Ishmael a couple of times, all of them books by Daniel Quinn. I just, I went to therapy once and I told Dominic, maybe violence isn't all that bad. And it is I think that is quite rooted in most of us that are alive somehow. Pop the cat, he can ignore some cats and then other cats, meow, he goes wild and crazy, to make sure that they know that, this is my territory rather than my land. It's my territory. It's that thing. Um but somehow they very, very rarely hurt themselves so bad that they die, and I think the same goes for the alpha male contests of gorillas and lions and whatnot. It's like, yeah, they they battle it out, but I'm not necessarily certain that the loser is killed. He's defeated, yes. He's wounded, yes, but not necessarily at least killed. And so, again, I think we've spoken about this, or I've spoken about it with somebody else, how when the Europeans went to you know, the Americas, and were confronted by these native tribes of indigenous people who do this thing where I'm in this tribe, this is our culture, this is our territory, and here's that other tribe and their culture and their territory, and they're, perfectly fine. They can do whatever they want to do as long as we can do whatever we want to. But now and again, let's just shake things up to make sure that on a random basis, they don't take us for granted. You know? So you draw first blood, basically. You steal a few sacks of grain or whatever you do, right? And you go back home again. You take a couple of kids and a lady or two, right? But it's not it's not this I'm gonna annihilate you so that all of you are killed. That is a very European, colonial, I don't know, aspect of it all that is not helped by technology. I mean, 200 years ago at least, you basically had to be in close in touching each other for me to be able to kill you. I had to be close enough to see you in the eye. I could smell your fear and your sweat and your blood. That's how close I had to be to kill you. Today, you can be on the other side of the world. You can kill thousands of people by, joysticking something or pressing a button and off things goes. So the distance, I also think, make it easier to go to the kill rather to the first blood. Okay, we're drawing first blood. We've shown that we're bigger, better, and stronger than you. And then you can kind of relax and settle down. So there's it's like there's an exponential rise in violence that I think is another type of violence than the violence that at its root core is probably part of the game of life, the way things are. Um, Much more than what we modern culture, what we do with violence that turns into this extreme kill killing spree somehow. And I just want to throw in another piece of that. I saw yesterday on Twitter somebody, it was DHH, David, whatever his name is, who
Mm,
runs 37 Signal, if that's
yep,
what they're called now, base camp.
yep.
Them. He had written a post about the Canadian truckers, and then he got a lot of flack because he was saying that this is a violent or a non-violent protest. That's what
Mm,
he got
mm, mm.
flack from. No, it's really violent. And he then sent out a new piece yesterday, um, stating that we have to put violent on it because that is how we justify taking action. So it's like if we label an opposition, a protest violent, then we can come at them with all our might because they are violent. And he wrote, I just skimmed the piece, but he wrote that um, that's why nonviolent protests are so powerful.
Because there's this
Be-
fine line between violence and aggression, right?
yeah,
Because if you think of what Gandhi said, so Gandhi said, if someone slaps my cheek, I'm going to show them the other cheek, right? So he was like, that's my idea of nonviolence. Like, if you also look at it, it's an extremely aggressive move. You're not covering when you get hit. Your initial reaction is to like, cover and fear. But that's not what he's doing. He's on the contrary. He's like, oh, you slapped me here. Now how about this? Like, take another shot. Like, is that all you got? So it's extremely aggressive, right? It's just non-violent. There's that there's that
yeah,
clear distinction. I'm not hitting you back. I'm not causing you harm, right? But it's extremely aggressive when someone hits you to show them the other cheek and say, oh yeah, here's another shot. Let's see what you got, right? So even with this, it's like there's a sense of when you mention the difference between wars of the past and wars today, it's like there's that sense of your actual skin in the game. You're
yeah,
in the battlefield, you're on the front lines, you're experiencing combat, right? Now it's like miles away. In the past, it was right in front of each other. And before guns were invented, it was you had to be at arm's length to hurt someone. And even when you draw first blood, it's not necessary that you could kill someone with that first blood. The other person may get you with an even more lethal blow, which will kill you first, or killing both in the process, right? So there's that sense that you are open. It's an equal exchange of sorts, right? There's an equal exchange, and numbers were one way of increasing the odds. But then there was always the possibility, because you're fighting hand to hand or weapon to weapon at close quarters, there was always the possibilities that the war can go either side. But now, like you said, things are, just click a button and, we already got all our guns pointed at you. There are like 1,000 planes in the air. We're going to get you no matter what you do. There's absolutely, it's almost like, dare I say it, there's no more fun in fighting. Like if you look at the playground, the first game every single child does is fight. Like, you have a little infant baby, you give them your hand, and the kid is trying to pull your little fingers, trying to smack it around. Like there's that sense of combative exploration with every object around it. Right? You give a child a little toy, and the first thing its response is to break the toy, shake it around, fling it somewhere, try to break it in half. knock it against something, right? There's a sense of destruction being an innate activity through which the child learns creation, right? That destruction is an active component of the creative process, right? And I'm wondering that by leaving aside the actual, there's no combat left in war anymore. It's just like you said, click a button and nobody really knows what's happening. Nobody even knows. And you have a machine reading out numbers and saying, oh, we killed so many people there. They killed so many of us. Someone standing there on the front line, next second they just vanished. They don't even know what hit them, right? Like there's no honor in dying when you don't even know, when you didn't even fight a battle. You didn't get to fight. You just vanished in thin air because something dropped on your head. Like there's
Yes.
no, exploration of the combative drive to exert oneself to one's maximum potential, challenge the opponent. It's my best versus your best. There's no experience of an engagement. And like in the past, you had the concept of even dying in battle is an honorable death, and you thank your opponent for giving you that honorable death, right? Like it was a game and the rules were clear, the rules of engagement were clear, the rules of what was victory, what was defeat, what is surrender, what constitutes a good death, what is that fine line that you never cross no matter what. All of these were explicitly laid out and the game continued, right? And now it's like none of those rules of engagement, those rules of warfare, the game has completely changed and nobody knows. Least of all, the soldier has no clue what's happening, right? He's just being, you know, pushed into battle and he just does things on, as a remote control, like, he's just a puppet in the hands. Like, someone had said that war is like, the old man's game, the old general's game, and the old generals just play and the young men just die. That's pretty much what war does. Like, so you have a few old men just playing their pawns and trying to figure out, oh, is my strategy better than your strategy? And they're playing this grand game where the stakes are high and the young men on the battlefield are the ones dying without even knowing what was the move that they were a part of. They don't even know the big picture.
Yeah. Just want to cut in. Are you recording locally? Because and if
Hmm.
not, can you record locally? You are?
Yes, yes, I am.
Good. Because your internet was a bit wobbly there. So when I hear you speak about this, I think about Matthew McConaughey and his biography Green Lights, which I really enjoyed. I've listened to it 2 or 3 times, I think. He speaks about a trip to, I think, Mali in Africa, where he comes out in this village somewhere out in the countryside, and he enters a wrestling game with like the village champion, this big burly guy, and he gives it his absolute best. They go 3 rounds or something, and the big burly guy wins, but Matthew is so confused because he's like lauded as if he's the winner. Turns out nobody has ever been able to do 3 rounds with this man. So just the fact that he could be in it for 3 rounds was a victory in and of itself. It's like, yeah, where all of a sudden the odds are getting even. And this how this the big burly village man, is like, at least after a while, could see, could honor Matthew McConaughey for what he had achieved, right? So that honoring aspect, and honor is a topic in and of itself that I think can be definitely questioned in many ways. But here it's like, yeah, because there can be there can be good from it. There can be bad from it too, like most things. But
It's a mutually accepted contract in this case, right?
yeah,
Like it's like,
yeah,
okay, you and
yeah,
me, we go at
yeah,
it. And if I win, I get the spoils. If you lose, you could lose your life, but I will respect you. I will respect you because
Yeah.
you entered into this engagement, this interaction with me. It's like, if I do look at it from a play perspective, you and me playing this game, the odds are this isn't a safe game. This is a dangerous game. So you could die, I could die, but we're willing to play. We're down to play. And for that, I respect you
Yeah.
because the game is not about victory. The game is not about defeat. The game is not about score. The game is not about winning or losing. The game is about playing. And that's what Matthew did. He jumped in and he played the game,
Yeah.
right? And that was worthy of celebration.
Yes.
And I feel
Yes.
like that's something we've lost. Like even with sport,
Yeah.
we we celebrate the winner. We don't even look at the loser. In fact, we go in and rub salt in their wounds.
Yeah.
We go and,
Ridicule
point the
them.
camera at
Yeah.
them in that time of thing, and we make them feel like losers, right? We don't make them feel like winners for having engaged in that game,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Let alone war. I mean, if you look at it like the whole concept of Western civilization annexing the smaller kingdoms and taking over all of, oh, you little people can't control yourselves. You're always playing and fighting amongst each other. Let me take care of all of you. So I'm just going to vanquish you, kill a million or so people in the bargain, and then rule you, tax you, suck your blood. And see, you're not fighting anymore. See, I'm such a nice person, aren't I? Right? There's this sense. And then, because you no longer have 100,000 people fighting amongst little tribes, there are tiny little battles which really don't have a grand significance in the scheme of things. You now have 10 humongous large players fighting 10 viciously powerful wars which can destroy large swaths of population.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a question for
Yeah.
debate like, what's a better option?
Yeah.
Leave the little tribes to fight tiny, insignificant battles which
Yeah.
don't really destroy large amounts of the populace, right? But which is happening at frequent intervals because
Yep.
people just love to fight, or supposedly put an end to all the fighting. And then one fine day when, things can't be held down anymore, suddenly it erupts. And then there's this one grand war. We have a world war. We have things like that. And then millions of people dying. So I wonder
Yeah.
who's going to win that debate.
Yeah, and he's like, without having much argument for it, I would definitely say the first one I think, is much more sustainable long term than the second one, especially coupled with technology where what is left is so devastated. Um, but I listened to our fourth conversation, episode 44. Um, and what you pointed out about how touch and intimacy, there's like with strangers, I can shake your hand at most, friends, I can hug, and then there's sex in the bedroom, intimate, naked, in and out, that type of. It's like we have these clear boundaries. And I'm just relating that also back to this aspect of the technological warfare, perhaps you can say. It's like it is touchless to a large extent. And I'm not, again, that's, it's like it's one way to not utilize all of our senses, to not make our experience be as felt as, two people fighting. Yeah, you're gonna feel it and you're gonna smell it. And, it's like it's gonna be there, it's gonna hurt. But sitting in a office somewhere, controlling bombs or drones or whatnot, and then there's a high rise full of people and it just goes boof, gone. It's like it distances me. It cuts off the experience of it. I'm I mean, I'm sure that it perhaps feels horrible for somebody like that, but it might also feel, "Hey, I did it." It's like, I don't know. I don't ever wanna be put in that position. But it is a danger when we do, just as in the we're no longer allowed to touch each other. When I went to the embodied intimacy, and it's like, yeah, wrestle. He's like, how? I don't know how. And, what can I do? How can I touch somebody like that? I don't know that because I haven't been doing it. So there's a link to the loss of sensory experience, perhaps, that I also think this distancing it's not helping us.
It isn't like, it's because I was just thinking, if you replace coitus with combat, it makes the same amount of sense because it's just that rawness, nakedness. You can't hide anymore, right? Like when I meet people out in the street, everyone has a certain persona, which is a mask over who they really are. It's only when you get into bed that the person's real identity, their responses, the actual likes, dislikes, a lot of those things come out in the open because there's nothing to hide. I mean, like everyone is raw and naked. And I think the same thing with combat when you are engaged with someone in a life or death situation, you don't have the bandwidth to put up this pretense, this persona, this wear, this little mask, and oh, this is my personality. It just exudes itself in raw action, right? And whether it's horrible or exciting is something that each individual experiences for themselves, and that grade of am I happy with this excitement of being in battle, in conflict, in combat with someone, and at the same time, am I unhappy that I'm causing pain, suffering, violence onto another, right? That little tightrope, that little balance is something that each one figures out for themselves. And that's by engaging. It's like when I see these little kittens of mine, little puppies playing with each other, they're fighting. The first thing they do is fighting. It's like they don't even, their eyes aren't open, their hands and legs can't move. They're just like that. But the first thing they do is they're jostling against each other. They're trying to fight for their mother's milk. They say,
Yeah.
no, let me suckle first. No, I'm going to get this milk first. You go next. Right? There's that constant, the first instinct is to fight, right? And as they start playing these games of combat with each other as they grow, they start hitting each other, they start jumping on each other, they start prowling, they sneak attack each other. They're constantly doing that. But it's incredibly beautiful to watch how they give each other feedback. If that swipe was too hard, it's like, "Oh, oh, oh," and the other one immediately is like, oh, okay. Like it
Yep.
depends, right? Some probably take a little bit longer, some are more astute and perceptive of the pain they're causing, but they get it. They all get it because they're constantly playing this game and they understand. Oh, that was too hard. Okay, next time I'm not going to swipe so much,
Yeah,
right?
it's a
There's that,
calibration. It's a real life calibration of sorts. Yeah. How strong
which
am I?
doesn't
And
happen.
how much does it hurt if I do this and you
Yeah.
go down? Okay. No more fun. Right? It's like, shit, I won't do that next time. I'll do half and see what happens.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's the thing. I mean, like, how do we ensure that this calibration happens in each one of us? And I think the answer is to encourage more contact, more combat, because they're very close to each other. We can't, by separating ourselves from combat, we have separated ourselves from contact, right? And by separating ourselves from contact, we have disallowed or taken away the playground of combat, right? Under the name of, oh, it's violent, it's dangerous, it's bad. But by not allowing it, we've actually made it more violent and more dangerous because it's now repressed, it's unexplored, it's uncalibrated, and
yes.
now it's going to burst.
Yeah. And the uncalibratedness of it is kind of what if I just, I mean, I know basically nothing about it, but if I look at like gang wars, it's like it is this aspect of the modern way of doing war that makes it such a horrendous thing that wreaks havoc in many families' life, because we're no longer just having a fist fight and you go down and I win and yay, blue's the one. Um it is the I'm gonna kill you all by I'm gonna shoot you with a gun. It's like so that calibration of sorts, or the escalation that comes with not having calibrated, makes it makes it more dangerous, makes it more violent and risky, and chances are it will lead to deaths, and they seem so uh unnecessary. As a white, middle class, well-educated woman in my, turning 50. It's like it's so far. The culture where it's so far from me. It's hard to put myself into the shoes of a gang shooter, and just how do you come to that place? Because it's a different world, and I realize that and I understand that. But there is something, it seems as that's maybe um a representation that can be easier to look at and perhaps less provocative to look at than us saying, maybe we should have some wars. But but it's like, because if gangs did it the way indigenous people have done it throughout, yeah, sure, there would be blue gang over here with their culture, there would be red gang over here, and there would be some, "Oh, isn't it time that we, you know, let's show them that we're strong." This randomized, keep you on your toes, but we're never gonna shoot to kill. We're never gonna maim you in such a way that we then go into the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, because that just leads to, I mean, it just never ends. But if
Because
it is this, we're not killing you. We're just messing with you a little bit so that you know that you're not to mess with us. And then in a while, you'll mess with us a little bit so that we know that we're not to mess with you. And we keep each other kind of on this same, like, same plane somehow.
yeah, it's kind of like there's this excitement to be, just life just gets boring, right? After a while, life is routine, life is boring, same old things again and again. But what if you had to live with the possibility that anytime anyone could attack you, right? Now there's fear, but there's also excitement because there's just two sides of the same coin. Like you have fear on one side. Now, if you're not, you can look at it and say, "Ooh, that's exciting. Imagine someone could sneak up and pounce on me." Right? Imagine me and my buddy are best of friends and we're just playing hide and seek. I don't know when he's gonna like jump out of the closet and like say you're in, like, right? I mean, that's when that's a game, right? The only difference with real life and playing in the playground is the stakes are higher, the consequences are real, and people can die, right? Now, how do we how can we play these same games at a safer level? How can we find these nuances between the extremes? Like there's this there's right now, even this situation, everyone's like, let's just stick to dialogue, let's try to have conversations. But think of it the other way around. If you were in a romantic relationship with someone, and if are you telling me that there's no way it would go to sex and all we're gonna do is just exchange sonnets and like, letters of love and appreciation? That's the same with saying that, we're going to not fight, to solve our differences, but all we're going to do is talk.
Yeah, you never get to the makeup sex.
Right? Exactly. There is going to be, if the same thing happens in relationships, like even the most ideal of relationships, the most perfect of relationships, there is a wave which goes up and down. There are moments of ecstasy, there's moments of complete despair, there's moments of heightened conflict, there's intense interactions, there's heated arguments, right? There's all of that happens. And it's almost like we're trying to sanitize that out of the human soul and say, no, all we're going to do is go to the UN and say hi and nice things to each other, and we're never going to fight. We're never going to fight. That's not going to happen. It's unnatural and it's unlikely. And the longer you keep up that pretense, the more intense is the explosion when it eventually happens, right? And sports was meant to be an interim experience. It was meant to be like, okay, you and me, we want to, we're going to solve this. Okay, not through fighting. I mean, like, if you think of the, like, back in the day, I think in India, we had this concept where if a king wanted to wage war against another king or he wanted to expand his territory, he would just send a white horse out, and that horse would enter any kingdom or any place. And if the other kingdom into which the horse had walked into wanted to fight, that was a declaration of war, right? If he didn't want to fight, he would say, okay, I'm going to be your ally and I'm going to pay a certain amount of taxes, and then you take care of my security, right? So it was a bloodless way to expand and to annex lands. And if you look at it back in the day, that was just one way of looking at this. Other way is like, you and me are fighting, we're like arch enemies, but you know what? Instead of killing million people on either side with a long protracted war, losing money and resources on either side, why don't we become best friends instead? Now, that's not likely to happen because we don't like each other. So, what we then do is we have a marriage of convenience.
Mm.
Your kid and my kid, they're married, and now because we're married, we're now related, and now as relatives, we can hate each other, but we don't have to kill each other in the back, right? And we can also find some nice things to do with each other. Now there's a bond of kids that between us, there's a mingling of blood, and seeing little grandkids from either side. This, all of that rage just melts, and you're like, oh, little kiddo, come on over to grandpa, right? And it's almost like we've done away with so many of those different ways of dealing with conflict. We have left with only dialogue and war. That's it. Diplomacy or full scale war.
Yeah, which is kind of the same thing as this handshake, hug, or sex. It's like we silo. It's like these are the ones that are available and nothing in between. Same here. Okay, diplomacy or we're gonna bomb you to pieces. Like, but what about the rest?
Oh, you remember that scene in Troy? So, the two armies are facing each other and they're about to, like, go into like full fledged battle. And then the king comes up with a suggestion. He's like, okay, instead of putting all these men to battle, your best man versus my best man. Right. And then there's a huge burly guy comes out, and then Achilles on the other side, and then they fight, and then Achilles wins in just one fell swoop, and the war's over. That's it. I mean, like,
Yeah.
why couldn't Putin and the other guy just, like, fight each other? I mean, that would be fun. It would be like pay-per-view, and it'll probably sell more than anything else. I mean, where are the creative solutions?
But that is actually a point though. War is also a driver of the economics of our culture. So, who wants war and who doesn't want war? Cuz the like the war industrial complex is a huge part of our global finances. So, wait, if Putin and whoever were to fight it out fisticuffs, No, we wouldn't be able to sell arms and bombs and tanks and airplanes and all of the medical supply and all of the uniforms and the shoes and the this and the that and the other thing. There would be a lot of people out of business.
Yeah. Like, I think someone just I read this on Twitter. Someone saying that there are no winners in a war, and that was absolutely right. In the past, there are no winners. Or on the contrary, they're both winners because it was more like a purge of get out my violent streak, my tendencies to engage in manly warfare and all of that stuff. And now it's like there are
There
no
are
winners
those
because
there.
you don't even know you didn't get
Mm,
the opportunity to fight. I mean, you just pulled the trigger and you just played with your little finger and things just happened. Someone died. The experience of actually fighting for it wasn't really as intense as it was in the past, as intimate as it was in the past. And now you have just people dying and then things happening. Like you said, the real winners, it's like neither of the people who fought are the winners, but the people behind the scenes, the people pulling the strings, and
mm,
everyone else profiteering from the
and
experience of two people
and
fighting.
they are the winners.
They
Yes,
are the winners,
precisely.
right?
The
Yeah.
the corporations and the organizations are the winners, which, you can draw it to the COVID, the global pandemic aspect too. It's like there's no winner in a global pandemic. Yes, there are.
Right?
Billionaires have gotten richer. It's like and so which kind of comes down to this root that I'm still this is one that I am struggling with because I've come to the fact or the point where I go, violence might not be all that bad. Now and again, it actually serves a purpose and it can be a part of it is a part of the way of life. But the win-lose game that maybe it's just that it's been so mutated from what is kind of a part of the way of life. It's like, okay, today it's my turn to give up my life because you need to eat, and tomorrow it's your turn to give up life because I need to eat, amongst prey um and the people, the animals that prey on prey. What do you call those?
Predators.
Predators, thank you. Prey and predators. It's like there's a win-lose that I don't have to, like, put the win-lose aspect on it. It can be more this gratitude aspect of it. It's like we are here to help each other survive. Connecting to Braiding Sweetgrass by Robert Walt Kimmerer, for instance, where it's like this the notion that all harvest is bad. No, actually, they prove that sweetgrass fares best when there's somebody harvesting it appropriately. If you'd harvest everything, it's gone. If you don't harvest, it actually diminishes. If you harvest it just right, it thrives. So this we are here to help each other live. And if I'm the one who's prey. Yesterday I was the one who ate the carrot. Today you're the one having rabbit for dinner, right? But the win lose that we have today, perhaps it's the same curve of exponential growth as the technology of war has come to. It's like it is win lose on such a scale, on such a thwarted, warped way that winners are. it's just ridiculous. Nobody needs to have that much, and the losers are fucking lost. They are dying because the loss is so grave. It's not, okay, you got in two more good fisticuffs on me. And, it's like, okay, I'll have a few bruises, but, give me a week and I'll be back on track. No, you're down.
It's almost like the desire to be rid of violence is an innate violent desire, right? There's this obsession like, oh, no violence. Let's put an end to all wars. Let's put an end to no more conflict, nothing. Let's all live in peace and harmony. Like it's almost like that desire to not be violent is violent in itself because you're like, we have to end violence. We have to destroy violence. We have to kill violence, right? So, in a way, the desire to be rid of it is in itself a violent desire.
Act. Yeah.
And that seems to be the reason why so many people were like, the larger countries are like constantly like, oh, you little countries are always fighting amongst each other. We're going to take over your country and put an end to these wars between all of because you're now all a part of ours, right? We're going to take care of you. And when everyone's so busy fighting for their survival because, they're being taxed, they're being oppressed, they're being bullied, no one has the steam left to fight amongst each other anymore because they're just fighting for their survival, right?
Mm.
And that is almost construed as peace, right? Because to an extent, this is why I said the opposite of war is not peace. Peace is passive. Peace is not an active thing. Peace is a vacuum, and eventually something's going to come in, and more often than not, war, right? So the opposite of war ought to be play, not peace.
And if it's like, if you have a plot of land and you take away everything that's growing on it so that it's bare, that is kind of what we do. We take away all of the violent and we leave bare soil, which then would be peace. But nature abhors these vacuums. Nature cannot have a plot of land without something growing on it. Something will start to grow, and we call that weeds. Unless tended, I've sown all of the grass, I want this to be a perfect little lawn. It's like, it's going to be what we call weeds, which is the violence. He's like, oh no, we can't have that. Let's tear you out. Um, oh, that's so interesting. It just kind of came together for me there.
Yeah,
Um,
that's beautiful, right? Because like it's man's instinct to create beautiful gardens, manicured and pedicured to look like pretty pruned, fences and hedges and everything shaped like little animals and statues and designs. Oh, look at that. Such a beautiful garden. Isn't that a work of art? Walk into the forest, any jungle, anywhere in the world, and tell me that isn't a work of art. But no, the gardens which we create because we planted stuff where we wanted them to be and we shaped them the way we wanted them to grow, that becomes a work of art. Right?
mhm,
How is that not violent? How is
yeah.
not letting, just letting nature do its thing? How is that wild? And how is our carefully manicured, chaperoned, pedicured spaces works of art?
Yeah, and
Beats me.
care. It's like, yeah, there's violence going on there. That is I'm guessing that what we've spoken about is throwing people some tankespjärn that might be very, hard and be like, no, I don't want this to be at all. And it's like we are just talking, but and that's kind of the thing that happened when I had read my Ishmael for the third or fourth time last year, and I came to Dominic in a therapy session. He was like, it was hard to even let the words out of my mouth, maybe violence isn't all bad. It was like, I can't say this. He's going to think I'm dumb. It's like there was so much stopping me, so much cultural shit, norms, rules, regulations, you're supposed to, ethics and moral, all of that stuff just going, shut up. You cannot say that. Um, and the more I think about it, it's like it does make sense. And it is this, maybe this is also one of those aspects of going with the flow or not going with the flow of, and like the effort that can be there when you go with the flow, when you use your muscles, when you're like, that's the one-on-one battle, or at least the at arm's length battle. But the war industrial complex that we see today of Russia bombing Ukraine or whatever they're doing, is like it's this efforting. It's like we've come away from the way of the world, and we're like, that's like the formal garden. That is like the formal garden. I need this to look like this, and so I'm gonna make it look like this. I'm gonna pull out that tree, and I'm gonna, reshape this plot over here and remove the rocks over there and put them over here. It's like it's it's mind-boggling to think of, but and it's it's hard to think of also because it's like the fear and the terror and the hurt and the pain and the loss that will come from this. It's like, oh, um, it's
It's
hard
very
to take in.
it it's really hard to think of, when to make a statement like violence is something, it doesn't necessarily have to be all bad, right? Because it's almost like we assume that we're good human beings if we're not violent, right? And we assume that if we're violent, then we're bad human beings. The simplicity of that statement makes it all the more violent because we're just immediately classifying, putting people, splitting people apart, right? We're creating more room for violence, more likelihood of violence, right? There was this Korean movie I'd seen a while ago, spring, summer, autumn, winter, or something to that effect, right? And there's a story about this little monk boy who grows up with the senior monk. So the boy is just a little, maybe a 5-year old, and the monk is probably like 65, 70, and they're living together in a remote, uninhabited island, just the two of them, in the middle of a tiny little lake. And the little boy goes out to play in the afternoons. He takes the boat, he goes to the mainland, and then he starts playing around. And he finds these animals. So he finds a frog, he takes a big rock, ties it to the frog, and he watches the frog struggle because now the frog can't jump because it's got this heavy weight over it, and the frog can't move because frogs jump to move, right? He takes a snake and he ties it up, or he does something, right? So he goes around torturing these little animals, right? And he's enjoying himself. He's besides himself with glee. He's just like, ha 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 ha. The frog can't move. The snake is all tied up. So he's so happy, right? And he comes back home and goes to sleep happily. The the older monk, follows him and then sees what he's doing. He just quietly comes back home. He doesn't admonish the boy. He doesn't say anything. The little boy goes to sleep. He wakes up in the morning. He's got a big rock tied to his back, right? And he comes up and he's like, "What the hell is this?" And, the monk and him have an exchange. And the monk is like, "Well, if the frog can, you did it to the frog, I did it to you, right? And that's just the way things are." And so the boy gets the drift of things. He goes back, and, he unties them, creates this
Mm.
whole thing. And he does, he undoes everything that he's done. And then when he comes back, the monk takes the rock away from him as well, right? And it's an interesting idea, but the idea isn't as much as this tit for tat as what struck me, that it's innate for human beings to be violent. It's innate for a little 5-year-old boy to be violent, to torture other living beings for one's own personal delight. I've done that as a little kid. There were these little dragonflies. I would tie a little thread around the dragonflies and hold them up like, "Oh, this is my personal, chopper, and I'm just taking it around for a spin," right? And essentially, I mean, like, how annoying can it be? How painful can it be? How disturbing would it be for that animal to be tied by a string, unable to fly away? You know, for an animal, that's its survival instinct at stake. I mean, very stressful situation,
Mm.
right? And I did it. I enjoyed it. I thoroughly did it. Looking back, I mean, I was like, that could be like evil incarnate. But I don't know. Am I not? Am I the only kid who did it? Is that little Korean kid in the movie the only one who did it? If every person were to look back, they would find some streaks of violence deep within in their early childhood. Like these happened, and it's almost like we can't avoid these streaks in ourselves just to call ourselves good. We need to allow them to come out. We need to allow them to, because they have their purpose, they have their lesson. Maybe it, it's a part of the process of learning that, oh, if I do this, like it's almost like harvesting the grass, right? Too much is too bad. Too little is too bad. Just the sweet spot, just the right amount, right? Now, how it's almost blasphemous for us to say that there's this sweet spot of violence that is necessary in our lives. Not too little, because then you're just avoiding conflict, because conflict brings resolution. Conflict happens when things are left unsaid, when things are left unresolved, right? And when dialogue is not doing enough to clear the air between two parties, right? That's when it comes down to fisticuffs, because there you go, there's no other way out. I've tried everything else. This is just what I got to do, right? And that just means I'm not skilled enough through those nuances of that entire spectrum of engagement, of interaction, of debate, of arguments, of interaction between two people to find some sort of resolution. If I just bounce between the extremes where I'm not going to say anything or I'm just going to beat the crap out of.
Yeah. And you're not alone. There was a summer when I was a kid that we had what we in Swedish call blomflugeinvasion. It was like the invasion of the flower fly is the literal translation, a little bee-like, but it isn't a bee. It just looks like a little bee. And they were just all over the fucking place. We would tear the wings off and play hospital. It's like, oh my God. So yes, I've had my fair share of violent childhood behavior too, absolutely. Um, and I mean, it's interesting to talk about this when it comes to violence because I think violence is, like you say, it is one of those feelings that we've kind of it's so clearly stigmatized. We're not supposed to be violent. You're bad if you're violent. So that it's like it's a bad feeling and there's good feelings, but all feelings just are. All of them just are. And there can be, they can serve or not serve. There can be bad outcomes or good outcomes if you want to use those words. It's like, but we have like collectively, culturally deemed some as just these aren't okay. They're outside of the bandwidth of what is culturally okay here to feel, to be, to behave. Um, which I think is you can draw that to psychiatric diseases too. It's like it's not, oh, there's somebody who is manic depressive or schizophrenic or something. It's a spectrum. That's also a spectrum. Just like, and we're all on that spectrum somewhere. Um, but it's just like, no, behavior just goes too weird. So we cut it off and say that this is okay behavior in here outside of the boundaries of that. Not okay. You're sick. You're bad. I don't want you. Let's, keep you down, drug you up, lock you up, kill you off, whatever it is that we do. Um,
Ooh,
which
and
Yeah, go ahead.
no, no. I mean, I was just thinking on what you said because it's almost like in the past, you know, if you were considered clinically insane or medically unfit to remain in the population, you would be bound in a straitjacket. You would be locked up in an asylum, right? You would be electrocuted, lobotomized, and all of which were physically violent ways to confine that individual to an idea, a socially acceptable idea of normal, right? And at some point we stopped doing what we deemed as barbaric practices, and now people are just sedated, which doesn't seem so violent because you don't see anyone in a straitjacket anymore, you don't see anyone locked up in asylum anymore. But then isn't that chemical sedation equivalent to a spiritual castration of sorts because that
Yeah.
individual can no longer express oneself freely and effortless? Okay, assuming it's harmful to society, assuming it's harmful to others around, but to what degree? And by now confining that individual to, a zombie like existence, completely sedate, isn't that violent? Just because we don't see physical constraints and restrictions and spatial restrictions, does that mean that this is any less violent just because it's chemical and we don't see the chains that bind the individual, right? And it's like right now, just because there's no exchange of actual blood because people aren't fighting on the battlefield with barbaric weapons where you had like big wieldy axes and crazy weapons of war. Now it's just click a button and boom. There's no more Hiroshima, Nagasaki, so nothing really happened. It just took 5 minutes and the entire city just disappeared. See, we didn't use any barbaric weapons. It's almost
No.
like we don't see that blood, flesh getting mangled and torn to bits. So we don't feel that impact as much, or it's easy to pass it off. I wonder if there's the idea that if people experience that for themselves, they experience pain, suffering, discomfort, all of that in micro doses, would that actually prevent them from doing those in larger doses to others, or to allow that to happen themselves, right? By staying away from any sort of experiences, even at a micro level, at a micro dosage level, are we actually making ourselves susceptible, just like like inoculation, like children growing up playing in the mud, they get exposure to different kinds of germs and bacteria, so they actually grow more resilient. And by growing a child in a hermetically sealed container with no bacteria, no interaction with the outside environment, are we not actually creating a weaker child?
Yes.
Likewise, by not having any expression of violence in our civilizations, in our cities, in our societies, are we actually creating a weaker civilization?
And I mean, this, what you say, it links back to so much of what we've said, but the the one I'm gonna go with is the one linking to the calibration of my strength, of my thing. It's like when playgrounds for kids, and we've spoken about this in another episode, I think. It's like they are so sanitized in a way so as to never ever be able to cause harm, injury. Kids then don't know. Then you have kids who, instead of letting a kid climb a tree and learn how to climb a tree, how high can I go? Because what's my limit? How far is my reach? If the branches are further apart than I'm long, okay, bad tree to choose. you know, okay, I have to, it's like, it's that calibration, it's that figuring out what's my work area, what's the range for me. What's my reach? Oh, it's here and it's here. Okay, I can't do further than that. Huh, okay. And if I'm too small, it's like if it's too little, well, then that doesn't work either, because then I can't move. It's like, okay, then I find my optimal, it's almost like a window of opportunity for me. This is a tree that I can climb. That's a tree I cannot climb because I can't even get up the first branch. Okay, I will learn that. But if we constantly take away the learning opportunity, we are not giving ourselves the opportunity to calibrate, to learn, to grow into my strength, my agility, my reach, my ability to punch you on the nose, and then you won't ever talk to me again. Okay, that was a bad idea.
I have no
you know,
friends now. Nobody wants to talk to me because
Nobody
I'm
wants to
punching
play with
everyone.
me. Precisely. Why don't they do that? Yeah. Maybe because it's like we are so eager to help, to buffer. And it's like, yeah, it does turn us into fragile beings. Uh,
'Cause, even with the example of me and the tree is not inanimate per se. It's a growing creature, but it's still non-interactive. The tree is not going to try to climb me, right? So now when I replace the tree with another creature like me, right, two human beings trying to climb each other, wrestle, grapple, push, pull, that teaches both of us how far to go, how much to poke each other, how vital it is to play mischief with each other, right? And how much of it is important to do. Like, I could just push your nerves just the right amount for you to pull you out of a slump and, you know, make you chase me across the field, right? Because you were just feeling low and sad and you were just sitting there and I started needling you and now you got angry and you chased me across the field. And by chasing me across the field, you felt exhilarated and
I've
excited and now you're happy and now we both fallen in a heap and, just rolling around like silly kids playing around. Now we're both happy, right? But if I didn't push you to that little extent, then you would be all alone in your slump. If I pushed you too hard, now you'd be crying in that slump. And now I also realize that maybe I went too far, right? It's a learning process. Now, if that before the process even begins, or before the process concludes, or before the process continues, if a chaperone were to pull us apart and say, no, 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 don't do that. You go play by yourself, let her play by herself, right? And it's That seems like an artificial resolution, whereas the organic, the natural way would be to allow some sort of conflict to happen, allow for some sort of resolution to happen by itself, which may not be ideal, but nonetheless, it's a step forward. It's
Mm,
not a static, stuck situation. It's a progression, not a perfect reply, not a perfect resolution, but it's a progression towards something that will eventually become a harmonious status quo between the two individuals, right?
mm,
That between two individuals can be between two nation states, between two cultures, between two, you know, continents. It can be anything. The scale is unimportant. What matters is the fact that by limiting to one extreme where we say no contact whatsoever, right? Talk it out. You're just limiting the tools of engagement, of interaction, of engagement, of resolution. Likelihood of resolution happening is going to be limited. If you go to full extreme and just say beat the shit out of each other and just see who's left standing, well, again, not so good, not so bad. But who decides what's the ideal space? It's only mutually acceptable by interacting. I mean, unless the two of us get into some sort of interaction, maybe it's a softer engagement, maybe it's a heated argument, maybe it's an all out battle, maybe it's a quiet, two people just quietly sitting and looking at the sunset without a single word spoken. And at the end of it, both of them get up, walk away hand in hand. No words were said, nothing was expressed, nothing needed to be expressed. Still have
mm,
we still have a step further, we still have progression. No one can decide what is the ideal situation except the two people with actual skin in that game.
mm,
But now it's almost like the people with the actual skin in the game are given the least amount of importance towards creating that resolution or towards moving progressively further. And we have 100 third parties wanting to play their role, making this all a better situation, right? And that's where the profiteers come into the game. And then, there's the moment you open the space up to third parties, yes, and more often than not, the good Samaritans are going to take a back seat to the bad profiteers.
and I mean, I'm listening to you, it's also this aspect of the violence of the formal gardens of what's supposed to be when it comes to gender. Girls are allowed to cry, they're allowed to be weak, they're allowed to be emotional, they're allowed to hug each other and hold hands and kiss each other and, braid their hair and they're not allowed to wrestle, to get dirty, to climb high into a tree, to be strong. Boys, vice versa, the opposite, right? They're not allowed to cry. They're not allowed to hug each other or hold hands or be emotional because take it as a man, you know? But they are allowed to be strong. They are allowed to be fast and to be a little bit violent because, boys will be boys. And I'm just thinking how that's like that's the violence of the formal garden. Here's the girl garden, here's the boy garden. And woe you if you don't fit into one of those gardens. Then I'm gonna make you fit into it because you cannot be a girl who wants to be in the boy garden. That doesn't work. Or the other way around. Or stand outside of both, because that ain't me. That's not okay either. So there's a lot of the violence uh, analogy or form can really there's a lot of levels of that stack. Uh, and it's dangerous. This is where the danger is, isn't it? This is the danger. It's like when we when we, in essence, remove, like you say, the skin in the game aspect of me being me, figuring out me. How strong can I be? How fast can I be? How tender can I be? How funny can I be? How, loving can I be? How violent can I be? When we say, no, you're just allowed to figure out these three. And you'd better keep it within this narrow spectrum because if you go outside of that, it's not okay anymore. I mean, it used to be, yeah, sure, you can be loving, but you can only be loving towards a man if you're a woman. You cannot be loving towards a woman if you're a woman. That's not that long ago. And it's still valid in places on the earth, right? So it's like, it is like when we try to step out of the game of life and force other aspects, other forms into it as if we are above it, beyond it, like it's not valid for us. That, you know, it 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 ain't good.
Yeah. That's why I don't like this distinction of, calling, oh, those were barbaric hordes, and this modern civilization. We civilized the barbaric natives and indigenous tribes of the world, and we created this modern civilization of peace and progress. I mean, I call bullshit, because what makes what makes people barbaric and what makes people civilized is just a mask that people wear. I mean, like,
Mm,
in under this veneer of civilization, like the domesticated civilized world, is a thin veneer, right? That's why we have so much crime. That's why we have so many, people killing, dying, raping, pillaging, murdering. All of that was supposed to be a thing of the past, where, armies would come, vanquish our tribes, and then rape and pillage our women, and, like, steal our, resources and all of that. Oh no, now we are peace loving people. Really, then why is so much crime happening? How many
mm,
people were raped, pillaged, murdered, and stolen, and things happening still? If
mm,
it's just happening beneath the surface, that doesn't mean it's not happening. And it doesn't mean that the things happening beneath the surface are just an aberration. They're not. That's part of the expression of humankind, right? Not seeing what's happening, not being privy to what's happening, because the average individual growing up in society doesn't see this, doesn't wake up in the morning like in a slum in Bombay or a favela in Brazil and see things happening around them, people living in squalor. And if you look at it, people actually look a lot more happier in those places, because there's such a high density of people that the very fact that they have so many people around them makes them happier, even if they're living in supposedly a place of crime and poverty and violence. You know, everything that we're told, don't go to a favela in Brazil, don't go to a slum bay, like, don't go to, oh my God, like El Salvador is one of the world's most dangerous places, like you have tourist advisories. It's ridiculous, right? I mean, like, how can you say that when the crime rate in most cities, modern metropolitan cities across the globe, is just as bad, if not worse, just because you don't see it on the surface?
mm,
That doesn't mean the violence doesn't exist. And I feel like that's the same with people today. Just because we have these perfectly prepared personas and manicured personalities, the violence within is just as strong, as just itching to get out as before. In fact, more so now because it's repressed, right? And you don't have the ability to shout and scream at low levels of intensity in your regular workplace. All of that is repressed, and when you go back home, you take it out against your partner, your wife, your spouse, your husband, your kid, who knows what, right? Because it's the only place left, because you can't do that at your workplace, because then you'll lose your job and then your livelihood and everything else associated with that, right? How is that not violent? So it's almost like we're just hiding from the fact that we all are violent beings. And amusingly enough, the easiest way to get out of that violent streak is to actually allow it to express itself in a safer environment, in playgrounds. Like imagine both the Vladimirs, in this case, Putin and Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine, both had some sort of a role play experience where they're put in this little kindergarten space and they said, okay, you know what, if let's play a role game where Ukraine takes over Russia, and then what would you guys do with it? What would Ukraine do if you were to take over Russia? And you have this whole scenario where you play it across timelines, across industries, across spectrums of society, and then you say, okay, this is my vision for what I'd do and how things would go about, and then you have this whole game plan, you play it all out, you have like, AI, data mapping, and you figure out the whole works, and you have statistics, and you have the whole reports. And this is how I would rule the country. And then you could put in a chance, you say, okay, what if you were to take over Ukraine, all of Ukraine, not just a tiny little eastern bit, but all of it, it's all yours. What are you going to do? Right. And then, like, that's the kind of stuff I would like to see in the UN, not, old people just pointing fingers at each other and saying, "Oh, you did bad, you did good, you're not saying enough, you're not doing enough." Like, let's actually play with situations. Like, say, okay, if you were to take over the damn place, what the fuck would you do with it?
Mm,
Why are you so obsessed before taking that, before, towards taking that whole place for yourself? Right? And what if you were to take over control of the other person? What would you do? Right? And I would say like this is more an interactive space. You're creating a possible solution, you're creating awareness, you're creating open minds, you're making both the people think. It's not just about possessing. Oh, you have that, I want that. You don't have this, and I'm not going to give it to you. I mean, it's we're actually being rather infantile when you could actually grow and start playing more intricate games, but played in a safe structure. That's what the UN should be for, where you create.
mm,
It's a playpen where you create possibilities, and you. It's a safe space. A playground is essentially a safe space where you can play games which have less than real consequences, which have less than dangerous outcomes. Right. So at the end of it, if you lose the game, you don't feel so bad because it was just a simulation. You win the game, you feel great, but it's not going to let it get to your head because it's just a simulation. I think that's why I feel like the importance of play is not just at a very simple, personal, individual level, but it can, infiltrate larger organizations like the UN, where you start bringing people out instead of just playing war games where you have two countries playing together and just letting their armies play together once a year, twice a year. Why not role play games like this, right? This would be fun. Imagine, say, okay, you can invade us later. Before that, let's just play a mock battle. What, we just take, we play fight the whole scenario.
and it's like it would be really, really fascinating to see if if it would work, if people would in that situation, if they were able to let go of, oh, I'm not going to show them what I have. I'll just put in this little bit and I'll pretend as if, but really I would do this. It's like because of this fear of winning, losing, because of this fear of loss of face, of ego, of, but he still doesn't have this thing that I have. So I'm not going to even let on. It's like, would what would be required to make that an honest game? Perhaps that's the word. And it's like an open game where it is not, oh, I have this secret weapon back here. Yeah, I do have nuclear bombs. They don't know that, and I'm not going to show them. Um, how would you open up? And I've been for many years I've been saying this about Palestine and Israel. It's like the diplomacy of it doesn't make sense to me. It might make more sense if you kind of do what you say. It's like, okay, I'm Palestinian and you're Israeli. Okay, I need to come in here and argue for your sake. And you need to come in here and argue for my sake, so that I'm guessing a little bit what the monk wanted the little boy to understand by tying the big rock on his back. It's like, yeah, this is what it's like for the frog. It's like, hmm, okay, how can I make it better for the frog? Um, like so just because maybe that's the common denominator in the play scenario you say, the role playing. It's like it is this shifting of perspective. What happens if? What if this? What if that? What might be then? Um, and being open and curious to see what, where will that lead?
It's quite incredulous because in a way it makes even if it's the beauty of this is it's not about the outcomes at all because starting with the obsession that we need to find a resolution, we need to find a solution, we need to fix this problem, that makes it work, right? And that's already got stress associated with it. That's already got pressure around it. It's like, we have to do this. And like, there's this entire sense of gravitas to the situation. Like, oh my God, people are going to die. And like, it's almost like we're constantly, you know, trying to make things seem bigger than they are, or trying to make them seem, more scary or more dangerous. Or, you know, there's this obsession with wanting to make things seem more than they are, right? And it's not about doing the opposite, which is making things seem lesser than they are, but it's about just not focusing on only looking at it, but actually playing with it, right? Let's not study the situation. Let's not analyze the situation. Let's not look from this perspective, from this perspective, from this perspective. Forget all that. Let's just dive straight in and play the game, right? That's what this kind of a role play does. It's like, oh, forget about what you think. Forget about what other people think. Forget about what he said, what she said, what everyone's saying, what everyone wants. Let's just play. Let's get into this. What if you were to take control? What if I were to take control? Let's do what you would do. Let's do what I would do. You give me your country, I give you my country for a day. Let's see what we can do with it, right? I mean, like you have these things, it's like, oh, I'm going to make you mayor of my town for a day, right? Just for a day. Let's see what you do. You have these silly things that happen, right? What if you are found or the editor of this magazine for this week, right? People do that. They pull a random celebrity out of nowhere and make them the editor for a magazine for a week, right? Do that with a country. Like,
Mhm.
okay, Putin, you want Ukraine so bad. Why don't you rule it for a week,
Yeah.
right? And I
You'll
feel
see
like
how
it,
fun it is.
yeah, yeah, exactly, right? But we almost are so inclined to believe that, oh my God, he's going to get so power hungry. He's going to take all of Ukraine and he's going to take all of, Turkey and Istanbul and all of those places. And before you know it, he's going to swallow up Europe. So now what are you doing? You're just like, but I feel it's almost on the contrary. There's this belief that the appetite for power is insatiable. But I also believe that opposite is equally true, that people get disinterested with it just as quickly, right? People can get disinterested the moment their desires are fulfilled. They couldn't give a fuck anymore, right? They're like, oh, I mean, it's like the guy chasing a woman who plays hard to get versus the one he gets is like, oh, well, okay, now I got you. What? On to the
Yeah.
next, right?
Yeah.
There's this, both are equally true. So how are you going to like So maybe if we were to just give him a bit of the pie, maybe he would be happy, and maybe he'd just get so bored. Or maybe if you give him the whole thing, he'll just have indigestion and he'll just be like, "Oh my God, I don't want another country ever again. In fact, why don't you take half of Russia as well?" Right? You never know. We always like to believe that the opposite is true and that people are power hungry, evil, and gonna destroy the world. Well, maybe that's true, but the opposite is equally true. There are people who couldn't give a damn who would probably give you all their property and just walk away into the sunset because they're bored with it all,
Mm.
right? And how do we know unless we play these games? Because it's not just speculation and data and predictions and possibilities and analysis and think tanks trying to figure it out. I mean, I really think playing brings about something that is very raw, very real, very intimate, and it loves people you know to get a feel for it, right? If you were to live in my country for a week, for a month, right, it makes you more understanding of people from this part of the world, makes your system more accepting of the climate, the environment, the food. There's a complete change that happens, a systemic change that makes you more open to my country, my culture, as well as more appreciative of your own country and your own culture. It's a win-win in both situations.
Yeah, precisely, because that is, like, true, if that's the word. If I am open if I'm open to the possibility, because I mean, I've just as well, I've had my brother lived in Thailand for 10 years. You would find these old Swedes who would come there and, live there for a couple of months on their meager retirement because it goes a long way in Thailand and whatnot. And some of them loved it, and some of them we're just picking on the fact that there aren't any sideways, and if there's sideways, there are big fucking holes in them, and the like concrete slabs are, all messed up so you can trip and fall, and you not to speak about how the electrical wiring is done, and the traffic is nothing like it is in Sweden, and it's like, yeah, no, because if you want Sweden, you stay in Sweden. That's the whole point of it. You're in Thailand now. It is not Sweden. You can look at it and see, huh, it has to be a lot easier to be in a wheelchair in Sweden than in Thailand because of that. Yeah. And then you would also see, but the Thai people are much more helpful and what will get you anywhere, which might be a problem in Sweden because no, no, that's not my job. I'm not, it's like, so if you're open to it, then yes, there is this, again, it's a calibration of sorts. Again, I am I'm widening my window of opportunity, my work range when I see, oh, okay, that works in Sweden. It does not work in Thailand or India. Good to know, you know, rather than why doesn't it work here? It should work because it works in Sweden. Yeah, not very helpful as an attitude in general. Uh,
We should have exchange programs for politicians, right? Politicians from, have student exchange programs where you go spend a
yes.
semester in some other country, you actually study in another country. We should send politicians from different parts of the world to actually serve a portion of their term helping another country govern itself. How cool would
Yes.
that be?
That would be awesome. Imagine the Swedish agricultural minister all of a sudden being the Bangladeshian agricultural minister. It's like, yeah, you'll learn. Fuck me, you'll learn a lot, right? Or the infrastructure. Just go and be infrastructure minister in the US and you're in for a wild ride, I think. Oh, that would be. And it's like there you have this playful aspect of it where, man, the learnings and what can I bring home and what can I do? And I've never thought about it like that. I've thought about it when it comes to I worked for hemtjänsten, so caring for the elderly when I was a student at the university, like the uh, coming and helping them make breakfast and eat or cook dinner or clean or get dressed or shower or wash or whatever. Like that you can't do it anymore, somebody will come and help you do it. And I also worked at um, homes for the elderly, which a long time ago was called långvården, which was like this is it's the long care. That's the literal translation of it. So it's like at the end, that's where you go. Okay, and you can be there for, and just the humbling experience of, helping people go to the bathroom when you've made a mess of yourself in your bed, when you all of a sudden got diarrhea and you didn't even have time to press the button, but, sorry, work it out. Or, you know, shaving old men. That's a lesson for a young girl like I was, or a young lady. It's like, wow, I don't know how to do that. Oh, this'll be fun. It's like, how can you it's so mu and just cutting nails, fingernails and toenails. How do there's so much to that, and I've said for ever since then, I've said politicians should do, a summer stint, at one of these gigs to wipe some asses, you know, really to get to do that, to see. And it might be as valid to be, the trash, collectors, um, or whatever of those works that in essence, actually, are more sensory. Those are the works I would, maybe standing on a industrial, uh, you know, what do you call it? The
Conveyor belt?
conveyor belt. Thank you. On an industrial conveyor belt, it's like where there's loud noises and maybe it's really hot because you're melting iron, and it's like the works where there's a lot of sensory input, again, as a way to get out of these boxed in ways of being in the world where, there is so many people who are just like me. I don't have any calluses on my hands because I sit in front of my computer. That's my job. That's what I do. The sensory input is quite limited. Mhm. But sending them off to be acting politicians, just to be a Swedish riksdagsledamot, the parliamentary member, and going to be in the UK parliament, you know, man, you'd learn something. And then pick an African country, go there, go to Kenya. What's it like in Kenya? I'm guessing nobody would want to go to Somalia or Afghanistan or somewhere where it's like there isn't any real state almost. Oh, it's
Yeah.
like shit, but that would be such the potential for learning that shit.
It's a sense of osmosis, right? Because just being in that situation, it's almost like that's why I think skin in the game is so powerful because it's literally like skin, it's semi permeable membrane. It's like it actually allows things to transmit through and through. All you need to do is be present. It's like,
Yeah.
there's this process of osmosis where, experience just allows information, insights, ideas just flow into you effortless, right? All you need to do is just be present in that environment, in that space, in that here. And, and that's something that as people spend more time in power, they're more isolated from all these experiences. The higher you go up in the echelons of power, the more you're just completely isolated with what's happening in the world. All you are privy to is what happens in your little space, your little bunker, your little building, your little White House. You have no clue what's happening in the world, like really feeling what's happening in the world. Like I remember growing up reading these stories where the kings in the past, Indian kings, would, you know, hide in the under disguise and walk through the marketplaces, and and then they would catch someone doing something, and then a guy say, "What the fuck do you care? You're just a crazy old man, in a hood or a blanket." And then his men would come, take that guy away because he's breaking the law or something. But I found what's interesting is the fact that someone who's at the extreme highest authority in the state is also willing to come down to the lowest possible place just to experience what's happening in reality, just to experience what's
Mhm.
happening. Because if he would have walked through the marketplace in all his rivalry, then people would automatically be at their best behavior and nothing untoward would ever happen, and he would never know what's the reality of the state, right?
Mm.
And and I feel like that's something that's missing. Like, how does we've always looked at monarchy and demonized it and said that, oh my God, that is one evil man. And like the idea of an evil dictator has completely overshadowed the idea of a benevolent dictator, because that's
Mm.
what monarchy is. You're either a benevolent dictator or you're an evil dictator. And I don't know. I mean, like, I haven't studied history to be able to check the statistics. A percentage of benevolent dictators is to, the ratio of benevolent to evil dictators. But just assuming that all monarchies and all, dictators are evil and that the only way out is by democratic rule, I don't know. I mean, like, things really haven't seem that much better to me. I mean, I don't know, but think about it. I haven't lived in a time of monarchy, but like I really don't see much difference from what happened in the past in history to now. On a wide enough timeline, things don't seem to have changed to the extent that we'd like. And I feel like that's simply because the person at the top is probably not a person at the top. It's, it's like we spoke about war, it's a whole bunch of people profiting behind the scenes. So similarly, it's naive to believe that one single person is making all the decisions. It's naive to believe that Biden is the president of the United States and he's that one single man who decides what's happening, or who can veto everything that's happening. Putin is that one single guy who rules with an iron fist. It's kind of naive to believe that this one single individual, which makes me wonder if there is that much of a difference between a democracy and a monarchy. And if there is, then how much of it is different to us at the ground level? How much of life would change, right? Because every time we consider this discussion, we're always shown examples of evil dictators who suppress their kingdom and their people. But I mean, that those weren't the only people in the history of mankind. In fact, they're probably just a handful. So I wonder how we can introduce that sense of compassion in our rulers, whether they're democratically elected, whether they rule by, they seize power, right?
Yeah, where
Regardless
they
of how they
inherited
get it,
it. Yeah.
right? How do we ensure just because you're a nice guy from the outside, because you have a smile on your face and you feed little babies in election rallies, right? That doesn't mean you're a nice guy. Just because you wear this fancy hat on your head and you have this big twirly mustache doesn't mean you're an evil guy, right? How am I supposed to know? I can't, not by your appearances, not by, you know, whatever your spin doctors have put out as your personality. How do we build compassion in our children as they grow up so that the ones that eventually become politicians have the same level of compassion as the ones who become nurses and the ones who become doctors and the ones who become healers and caretakers, you know?
Or is it a matter of how do we not remove the compassion in kids
Right.
as they grow up?
Right. Because
And we have also just been speaking about the kid who tied the stone to the back of the frog. So how do we allow what is there in the game of life is perhaps a better, again, it is this pruning and it's like, no, we're not supposed to be like that. We come back to that. Uh, but I mean, in the 90s, I watched Undercover Boss a few seasons, which is, TV show that was just that. You have the CEO on a big firm who was like, all of a sudden he's down on the floor packing fish or, doing the trash can run or whatever it is that, the people at the base. And again, quite interesting to those episodes that I remember. It's like, yeah, the aha was a lot of the ahas were in the boss who was all of a sudden down on the floor, seeing, oh shit, this doesn't work. And why don't we do, so that you see all of that is there and perhaps not communicated up or communicated up, but it never reaches further up. It stops after 3 levels and doesn't ever get to the 7th level. But also when because at the end of each episode, there was the reveal, the taking off of the veil so that, yeah, I'm actually the CEO. I'm not Bob, the newly hired. Um, it's like, but you're a decent guy. It's like you're just like me. Yeah. So it's like the both and of that experience. Um, but I also just finished reading Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, two U.S. Navy SEALs who have written a leadership book, and they have a company doing leadership trainings and stuff. But one of the things that I really liked when it comes to the leadership was the fact that if I'm at the top, I'm asking questions sort of down the chain of command based and the quality of those questions is determined by the quality of the feedback that I'm getting, the facts that I'm getting up the stack. So that if I have confidence in that you on the ground, you're doing your job, you know what you're doing, you've thought about this, and the other thing, then I can ease off. I won't have to ask as much. So there's one I mean, it's a worthwhile read. You have to kind of peel away this horrendous American nationalism, win, 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 and the enemy's evil, period. And it's like so you have to peel off those layers, and then there's a lot of good stuff in this book, I have to say. But also in one of the situations, Leif Babin, who was then Yoko was his superior. Leif Babin comes to Yoko and he's frustrated as hell because the upper ones, higher ups, need, this 250 slide PowerPoint presentations with all sorts of shit and stuff that he just finds, why are they asking this question? Have they been here? No, they actually haven't, Yoko says. Have we invited them? It was like, "No, we actually haven't." So they do that. They invite their whatever CO from, who's in a town in Iraq 40 kilometers away to come and see what it's like where they're at, which all of a sudden gives him okay, I don't have to ask this question ever again because you would not ever come back alive from an operation if you didn't have that contingency planned for. Okay, check. I no longer have to ask that. So there is this the flow um that I think is, it can be sort of um you can use the sensory experience as a metaphor for it. It's like when I have skin in the game, when I know when there's a knowing in me of what it's like over here, then I can bring that with me and work you know, my stuff from whatever level I'm at. So yeah, having politicians do, you know, a month or two in Bangladesh or in India or just go to Norway for that matter. It will be different, right? Um, it would probably, again, if they're open to it, man, the possibilities that could come from that. And I'm guessing the empathy and engagement. Yeah.
It's almost like at the best, what we have right now is a certain kind of tolerance towards others, right? It barely even moves into acceptance, right? Like the bare minimum is tolerance, and that's almost like the gold standard now. Oh, I'm tolerant of other cultures. I'm tolerant of other people. I'm tolerant of the whole inclusivity thing is like, oh, we're tolerant, and to the best in terms of just making it sound nice and politically correct. Just say I accept, we accept. We're just accepting of all different varieties and diversities of people. But I think it's not going to really make an honest, genuine difference until we celebrate those differences,
Yes.
celebrate what's unique about people. It just doesn't cut it. Just tolerating or even just stepping up to acceptance is still below par. Like the only answer is a complete rambunctious celebration. It's like, oh my God, it's the Swedish New Year. Let's celebrate, right? Oh my God, it's Diwali, it's the festival of
Yes.
lights in
And it
India.
is a
Like,
lovely festival. I love
right?
Diwali. I've been
Right?
there. Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the beauty of it. Like, that's why I say peace is not enough. Peace is passive. We need to play. Like, if we want world peace, no, we don't want world peace. World peace is a sterile environment. We
Yeah.
need world play. We need Ukraine to play with Russia. We need countries to play with each other. And well, the Olympics were supposed to do that, but that's become more, it's more of a chest beating thing. Like, oh, I got more medals than you. We won the Olympics. We won. You lost. You suck. We're the best. Right? I mean, it's just as bad. It's no longer a celebration of every country that came in. Right? And I feel like that's where we lost the spirit of play, even in the games we share with each other. Right? So when I say world play, the Olympics again is not going to cut it just because all the countries of the world come together to play. It's not enough because you're still fighting. It's still a war. You're
Mhm.
just fighting for medals. It's like who gets the most gold at the end of the day. You know, it's not enough. I mean, it's
It's not
how do we
play.
find
Mm.
ways to play? Right? And that's, going there, eating each other's sweets. Oh, wow, that's like a Swedish dessert, or this is an Indian laddu. Like, how are you going to enjoy, celebrate? Like, you're going to dress up in like a beautiful kurta, and I'm going to dress up in this awesome Swedish outfit. And like, this, we need to really celebrate the stuff between us. And I feel like just there's something to do with that whole exchange program thing. Like it's let's get kids to travel from different countries. Let's get students, college students. Let's get interns at different levels. Let's get politicians. Let's get people. Let's get soldiers. Let's get people from every walk of life in different countries to find some way to interact. And I feel like all of our more regimental methods of interaction, like for example, sports, are not enough, because again it becomes competitive, and that is equivalent to a war. Because if you look at most sport matches, the audience members, the supporters are literally at war with each other, that my team is going to win, your team's going to lose, right? Again, what's so different? Why are you so appalled if someone's now invading the country? Because like that's exactly the sentiment you show when they're fighting each other in, in the football finals, right? Like how is it so difficult to believe that the spirit is the same? Just because
Mm,
no one's dying in that place and someone's dying here doesn't make the core sentiment any different. The core sentiment is you want them to lose. In that case, you want them to lose the match and the cup. Here, you want them to lose their lives and their land. But you still wish loss for the other. You're not celebrating the other. You're not even accepting the other. You're not even tolerating the other. You just want annihilation of the other, right? It's just a different matter that over here it's something which consequentially is not so big a deal, and here it's because life's at stake, it's a bigger deal. So now you show distress and like, how could someone do that? Well, that's
and we
exactly the
do it
sentiment
all
we
the
show
time.
when
Yeah,
our teams are fighting each other in,
yeah,
in sport
yeah,
matches.
yeah. As
Where's the
above,
real
so
play?
below. Yep, yep.
That's what I'm looking for. I don't know where the answer is, but I feel like this sort of a cross cultural exchange where people spend time with families from different countries, actually living with
Mm,
local families, that's where the magic is. If I were to
mm,
live in Sweden with a Swedish family, right? If a Swede were to live in India with an Indian family,
mm,
right? Regardless of the profession, where they come from, what they do, and why they're here with, and what the profession of the person they're living with here, none of that matters. The fact that a local from one country lives with a local of another country, lives, eats, breathes, sleeps, eats with the same family, that's when things change. That's when minds open. That's when people, not just living in a hotel, not just living isolated in a little bubble, right? So, like a Swede living in Thailand in his own little hotel bubble is still isolated from the
mm,
charm and from the experience of living with the local in their
mm,
environment, eating their food with their rituals. That's when because the gut changes everything. It's so powerful. I feel like cuisine is one of those things that makes these changes. It's like the gut goes and changes all those connections here. And so that openness we're looking for, like why aren't most people opening up even if they live there, is because this part doesn't change. And when I
No,
say the
they
gut,
don't
I
eat
mean,
the local stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They go to
And
McDonald's in Mumbai instead.
right? And eating it from the hand or the heart of a local person who made that food specifically for you. That's again, I feel, a big factor in changing. Like me cooking you a meal, even if I suck at it, with love, affection, and desire to, to host you, to be warm and inviting you into my home, that has a different feel. That's what makes you accepting. That's what makes you open to a different culture. So if I were to order the same dish at a restaurant, it still
Yeah, it's
it
something
would
else.
titillate my taste buds and probably make
Yeah.
me accepting of the cuisine, but not the culture.
Mm,
The culture comes when we eat in each other's houses, food
yeah.
that is cooked with the purpose of treating the other as a guest and inviting them to our home.
But I mean, my mother and aunt, my maternal grandfather was a railway man. And so I know that thanks to that, somehow my mother and aunt, as you know, late teens, young adults, were sent off and lived in France and whatnot. They took the train down and lived. And I was a foreign exchange student in the US when I was 17 to 18 for a year. And I was just realizing when you were speaking about that For me, it felt like a natural thing to do. It's like I had set my sights on that when I was younger and, made it happen. And now I'm thinking neither of my kids have done it, even though my oldest went down to Australia for a year, like a gap year, and did some au pair, which was just that, just that. It was excellent. Um, so I was thinking foreign exchange student programs doesn't seem to be as common anymore. They were much more common when I was a kid, but then I'm not sure they were because I actually don't know that many people who have been on foreign exchange programs. I know a few, but so maybe it wasn't that common back then either. And that's one of it is a big deal. It does cause you to learn a lot of things. It was very, very influential in many ways, I'd have to say. And then now I have here in Malmo, I have a friend who's been involved in an organization that do those exchange programs more specifically. This family's boy, is swapped with this family's girl, swap for a month or whatever. Youth International something or other. I can't remember the name. I'll type it in the show notes, but specifically I think for that purpose, to get to know, to take in, to open up for the diversity of culture, of cuisine, of tastes, of smells, of habits, of when do you wake up in the morning and when do you go to bed? And oh no, you eat at 10 o'clock. Okay, in Sweden we eat at 6 o'clock. It's like all of those things um that I think it's hard not to be impacted by it if you experience it. And I also have another friend who I know has set up a couple of years ago Swedish hospitality, I think she calls it Maria, um, where people who are traveling here to Sweden can, if they're, and she's like a foodie, I think, uh, people can find it and they can book. I want to come to dinner to your place. And I would then, or you would then, prepare a big dinner and I'd come and do that. So it's just for one evening, but it is the Swedish hospitality. You're invited into our home. So it isn't the restaurant experience. It is the home experience. Um, which I'm hoping that now, what with COVID kind of no longer being deemed a pandemic, will open up for more of those types of experiences again because something happens.
It is so warm. It, in a sense, when you use the word hospitality, it's like, in India, there's this saying that um, Atiti Devo Bhava, right? Which means the guest is God, right?
Say it again.
Atiti is guest, Devo Bhava, right? So Atiti or the guest is like God, right? So there's this concept which is kind of like baked into Indian culture across the entire subcontinent. It's like someone comes home as a guest, it's like, oh my God, God's come home. It's like they want to feed you, they want to like
Yeah.
stuff your belly full of food. They want to ensure you leave with a big smile face. It's a concept that just goes across all the different diversity of cultures within the continent, subcontinent. But the idea is so strongly baked in that you can never enter Indian household and leave without eating or drinking something,
I can
right?
vouch for that.
It's like, oh my God, I don't want to eat. I just ate. Oh my God, you just got to try a little bite of this, a little
Yeah.
bite of this. Oh, how
Mm.
about this? Oh, let me make my special chai for you. Like, there's just no way you can be without tasting something, right? And when I say something, that something is actually just food, but it's not just food. It's a spirit of their gesture of hospitality, right? That's essentially what it is. And I feel like the more people start doing this, like your friend's concept, the whole Swedish hospitality, there's another concept called the mehfil, right? The mehfil is these little impromptu, not really impromptu, they're planned as well. They're little musical concerts that happen with Hindustani classical musicians coming over to the home of a rich patron who invites other rich patrons, and one of them houses the artist, the singer, the musician, whatever, in their home and invites everyone else in the vicinity to come for an evening, a gala evening, a concert, but a home
Home
concert,
concert.
right? With a live musician in there. He's talking to you at the end of the concert and he's looking at each and every one of you. It's a tiny little room. It's not a huge room where he has no idea who you are.
Is there?
He can see and intimately connect with each one of the people in the room, right? The spirit and the rejoicing of that individual's ecstasy of his own artistic exploration is palpably felt by every person in the room. At the end of it, there's like a dinner and everyone's talking and networking, and you're getting to meet a real live musician who's following a tradition which is at least 5,000 years old, right? And here it's like everyone knows each of their gurus, like for at least 10 generations past, right? There's this sense of timeless culture being handed down. And the average individual who has no understanding of art, music, and the nuances of it is still privy to all of this happening in someone's house, right? And the it doesn't even matter if the patron is rich or not. Sometimes it is like really not very well to do people still go out of the way. They gather, they pool their resources, they bring that artist home, they put it together. But this concept brings the average non artistic, non creative individual living in society in the mundaneness of their routine world and bringing artistic, creative musicians who live in their own world in the clouds, bringing them together, and it kind of like it's an ancient tradition and still goes on today. It's not something that's publicized. You can't just go on to Google and find out mehfils near me. You can't really do that. It's more like a homegrown, home run, word of mouth
You get
spread
a
sort of situation,
personal invitation or word of
right?
mouth.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
From
And I
someone
feel
who
like
knows him over there,
yes,
5 blocks down.
yeah,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So I feel like this is so cool. I mean, like this idea that you're keeping a sort of a culture growing. In the past, this would have happened. A king would have done the same thing and invited his, you know, thousands of people in his city to come and watch. It filters down to the level of a single person bringing five of his friends together in his little one bedroom flat to watch,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like it crosses across these scales. It doesn't have to be 10,000 people, it doesn't have to be even 10 people. But the idea that we share a meal, we share cuisine, we share culture, and we allow that to exchange between each of us by inhabiting a certain space together at a certain time.
And again, it's the sensory experience of it. I can't do that from here. I would have to be in the home of your neighbor. No, it's like to really feel and smell and experience all of it. Yeah. How you said last time you said that you were um working on figuring out how to do more physical play. You were talking about a physical play space. Have you thought anything more about that? Or you've just been
No,
out
but
riding your motorbike or something?
yeah, I just took off on my new bike and I was just like, the idea that physical play is so important is something that I want to spread out. But with the whole COVID thing, people are still iffy towards sharing physical spaces together. But I think like that is the way forward. So I'm really expecting as things open up in the next few months, people get less wary and more accepting of inhabiting, personal enclosed spaces together. I really want to do something of that sort where, it's essentially going to be a kindergarten, right? But for adults, right? The exact same thing little kids do. Play with objects, toys strewn all over the place, right? Play with each other, right? Explore contact with each other in every which way possible. Because like we said, it's not just those three silos, right? It's something explore out of that, right? If people are so averse, if a caress on the cheek is considered sensual, and if the same thing done harder is considered a combative experience, a slap, what are the
In
the
betweens.
nuances between that? Where are the calibrations between that, right? And when was the last time we just touched someone's face just to say hello? Oh, so that's what your face feels like,
Mm.
right? We don't do that. It's weird. It's awkward. We can shake each other's hand, and for some reason that isn't weird. But if I were to shake your nose, that's weird. If I were to
That's
shake your
really
ear,
weird.
exactly, right? Like why? And there's that weird thing again. The idea that certain eccentricities, like what's weird, what's normal, is something that I do every day. What's weird is something that I've never done before. That's all there is. The only difference between normal and weird is something I do often is normal, something I never done before is weird, right? And I feel like that's another reason why we fight with each other in terms of countries and conflicts, because we haven't interacted with each other enough. So what the other person is doing is weird. Ukrainians think Russians are weird. Russians think Ukrainians are weird. Why? Because you haven't interacted with each other enough. We haven't interacted with each other enough to stop seeing each other as alien, as weird, as strangers, as eccentric people whom we should either annihilate or crush their spirits enough for them to follow our way of life so that they're no longer weird to us, right? It's as simple as that. And I feel like at a smaller level, that's what I'm trying to do, like create this play space where, eventually want to bring in, I don't want it to seem like some sort of uh, a peacemaking place, but some sort of a playmaking space. Bring your worst enemy, bring your lover you're having a quarrel with, like come in for a play session and start playing with each other, right? Outside of the role that you have siloed yourself into, right? Imagine the Ukrainian president and the Russian president playing a game of rock, paper, scissors. Whoever wins get Ukraine. Hey, what the fuck? Are you nuts? Okay, well, would you rather just me come and bomb the whole damn fucking place? All right, suit yourself. Now that it sounds ridiculous. Like this is exactly when I know that play works, because it sounds absolutely preposterous and silly to have a resolution that let this whole thing be settled with
Yeah.
3 rounds of rock, paper, scissors. Best of three. Whoever wins takes whatever you want. Sounds preposterous. No, that's ridiculous. How can we solve,
Precisely.
problems in
And
such
what
scale?
doesn't sound preposterous is Russia entering Ukraine. It's like, oh yeah. It's like, what the fuck? Why isn't that really preposterous? It's like, yeah, we've been expecting that, we've seen it coming for many, it's like, wait, hey. Um, yeah, it is fascinating how normative norms are. Um, and how weird whatever doesn't play along that specific angle, that specific line. It's like, there, you're allowed. But if you stick out even just a little tiny bit, weird. Can't
Yeah.
have that.
So that's, I think that, no matter what we do, I mean, the amount of content we speak about, I love in fact, I'm so grateful we're having this conversation, because this is us playing along that spectrum of dialogue versus all out conflict, all out war, full fledged war. This is it. This conversation right here is us exploring that spectrum. What we're saying might sound blasphemous, might be taboo, might be crazy, might be construed as just two people talking off the top of their heads and not having any skin in the game. I don't care. The idea is that we're having a conversation where all perspectives can be explored without shame, without fear. I can't. If I'm leaving this feeling, oh my god, I'm so ashamed that I said that. If I'm if I'm entering the space feeling, oh my god, I'm so scared I'll say something that isn't politically correct. What kind of free world am I living in, anyways?
You
It's
ain't.
ridiculous,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
you
it's not a free
ain't.
world. Then why am I so appalled by the fact that one country is invading another country? I'm not living in a free world, anyways, because I'm not free in here to say what I think, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. It doesn't matter what I think it is. The fact that I'm able to express it to someone else, even if it is ugly, whether it's bad, whether it's good, whether it's right, whether it's wrong, the fact that I can say it and the fact that you have the freedom to listen without feeling that overwhelming need to either accept what I say or to outrightly reject what I say. The fact that you have that freedom in that space to say, oh, let's see what Reddy has to say before dismissing it as, oh, that guy's off his head. Oh my God, he's like absolutely right. I have to follow everything else. I'm going to drop all my ideas and just do what he said, right? Again, we seem to be finding ourselves between these two binary extremes. And that's why I love play. It's essentially bouncing between these extremes. I love, that's my favorite version of play. Just take two extremes and start bouncing between them. I love
Mm,
you, I hate you. Now let's start playing between them, right? I want you, I don't want you. Let's start playing between them. I'm good, I'm bad. Let's start playing between them, right? Just dialogue, just war. Now let's start playing between them. And I feel like this is such a simple experience or, conceptual understanding of play. Like even on this trip that I went on, the biking trip, I looked at the whole experience as exploratory play rather than learning via explanatory study. Right? I
mm,
got a new bike, haven't ridden in over a year, over a decade, right?
mhm.
I'm clueless, I'm new on the bike, and I'm all confused. It's not the kind of bike I've ridden before. It's like, I've ridden a bike 2 decades ago, like it completely changed everything since then. So I'm like falling all over the place. I'm like riding into trees. I'm making complete fool of myself, all in the wild, not in a closed playground, not in a closed racetrack, but in the wild. Not the ideal of situations, not the best of playgrounds, but that's the kind of person I am. I like to throw
Yeah.
myself into the deep end because when I struggle is when learn fastest and
Mm.
best, right? It's just my personal preference. And I found that over years, this is the kind of person I am. There are kids who walk into the shallow end of the pool and then they slowly start splashing until they're comfortable to
You
move into the
jump in
deep
the
end.
deep
I
end
jump into the deep
immediately.
end.
Yes, it's like, oops, I can't swim.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
that's
Right.
ready.
And I'm like, and I
I'd
come out, I'm
better
like,
figure this out.
or die trying. It's like just
Yeah.
that. I mean, like being on that edge makes it more playful for me, right?
Mm,
But
mm.
regardless of the level of difficulty, the fact that I'm exploring without an external chaperone, without an ideal way of riding, without a specific progression chart laid out, without an instructor barking instructions in my head constantly, the fact that I'm doing all of this is what I consider exploratory play. I'm just like playing, trying to figure out things, letting things come out to the surface on their own, right? Versus if I were to study, I bought the bike on Saturday, I took off on this trip on Sunday morning. That's how much time I spent thinking. That's it, nothing else, right? But if I were to have done this the traditional way of studying, okay, this is your bike. Spend 1 week understanding the parts of your bike. This is your bike. Spend 2 weeks moving across in this particular pattern. Spend the third week slamming the brakes and understanding the clutch and the throttle. right? Now, if I were to do this, I'd still be here in week two, but here
Yeah.
I've already covered 2,500 kilometers and made a whole bunch of mistakes. And luckily enough, I survived to tell the tale, right?
And you had fun. You had
Right?
fun.
That's the thing. And how can we make these sort of exploratory experiences accessible and available to every single individual, regardless of the age, especially the ones who are expected to know all the answers and who would be shamed for saying, I have no clue how to ride a bike. So
Yeah.
I'm going to make a bunch of mistakes. And I'm so looking forward to those mistakes,
Mm.
right? Now, that would be, you know, a 40-year-old man saying that, no, 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 no. You're supposed to know the answers, or you're supposed to go to a professional and get the answer, that follow the answers to a T, right? But I want that play to be acceptance of looking foolish and going, taking my own words when I said acceptance is not enough, but we need to celebrate looking foolish. So the whole play space is just a place where people can come in, do things that make them feel foolish, look stupid, you know, feel silly, but do them just because that's what we do. We're creatures born to play. That's all we were born for. War may be one game in that whole spectrum of
Yeah.
play, right? Not the only game. And yet, not a game that needs to be abhorred and avoided, but just given its due, but to the extent that we understand is just one teeny weeny little game in the grand spectrum of play. Don't make it the end all and be all of all games. Nor try to push it away and say, no, we're going to eradicate one. We're never going to have that game ever again in this playground.
Doomed for doomed for failure. Yeah. So tell me, where did you go on your bike? Where are you? I've forgotten. Delhi?
Oh,
No?
so I rode the bike from
Yeah.
Bangalore to Bombay and back.
Hello. And how far is that?
It's 1,200 kilometers one way. But
Hmm.
what's interesting is so there are like three roads to travel. One is a national highway, which is like straight and narrow.
Yeah. The
You
boring
can
one.
just, yeah, the boring one. You can do super high speeds and you can
Yeah.
just keep going on. It's incredibly one of those rare highways, which is like, you know, typically traveling across India in the past, a national highway is someone else's backyard.
Mm.
That's something
Yes.
interesting and unique about India, that
Yes.
this could be the pipeline between two very important cities and, economic capitals of the city, etc. But a villager along the road is going to think that that is the place where I like to take my cattle to graze. I'm going to go
Yes.
through that thing. And
Yeah.
if your truck is transporting the most incredibly vital, resources
Yes.
across the country, I don't give a fuck. My
Yep.
goat need to cross the road.
Yep.
So I'm going to go, right? And I love that about my country. And I still do. But they have made now specifically cordoned off highways which don't allow, intersection from
So
either sides.
so those highways, because that's one of the things when I was working with India and outside of Bombay, driving on the highways is like, "Wow, you're going along, then you have to brake, slow down because there's this big bump. Okay, then you speed up again, then you have to brake, slow down because there's this bump." And I think it is precisely because there would be so many road kills otherwise that it's like you need to keep the speed down. But for me, it was just this is Indian fuzzy logic. This is not. But then I understand that they have now made cordoned off highways so that
Yeah.
you can't. Got it.
But those are boring. Those are so
Yeah.
boring. So I
Yeah.
just got off. As I'm not staying on this highway, I went off into the arterial roads. I went off to the state highways, took the long and, you know, winding roads across the mountains. And even better, I found one of these lesser used coastal highways which goes along the entire coast from Goa to Bombay.
Oh, so you went kind of that way and then up.
Yep,
You went across and up.
yep.
Mhm,
Right? So
mhm.
first I went up for a little bit along the straight highway. Then I
Mm.
went across, which was the
Yep,
mountainy highway. And
yep.
then I went along up again along the coastal
The
highway
coastal.
where I could see the sun, the beach, I could see the
Mm.
sea on one side and the mountains on the other side,
On the
right? And
gorgeous.
every once in a while there'd be a little river which would stop the road, and then there would be a ferry. So I get onto the ferry takes me across, and then I'd continue again. And the same journey, which could have taken me just 2 days with a single night halt if I didn't want to ride at night, which I don't like to do, took me 5 days because I kept meandering through all of these routes, and there's snow, and then there would be like, I would be going like, and then suddenly there's like some animals, and I'm like, slow down again, and then again I'm just, then again I was like, they're like school kids. Oh, it's school time. Everyone's left, and there's a whole bunch of school kids, and then slow down again. And it's so interesting that what I first initially felt was like, oh damn, there's someone in my path. Like it was initially, it was a moment of frustration, it was irritation, it was annoyance. But over time I actually started celebrating it. I started realizing that those incidents are serendipitously reminding me to enjoy the journey, to
Yeah.
enjoy every interruption, good, bad, or ugly. The speed breakers are a reminder that the path of life isn't a straight thing, it's never going to be. And I can be frustrated by those interruptions, or I can celebrate them. I can be
Mhm.
annoyed with the school kids who crossed my path, or I can stop and wave out and smile and take a selfie with them, right? I could, like, curse the cow that walked into my path, or I can say, wow, look at that magnificent creature. Like, wow, man, I never ever saw, like, look at the dignified majesty of that being. Wow. Like, it's a reminder, right? Like that the speed of getting from point A to point B on the map is the least important part of my journey, right? And the most important part of the journey is the part that I haven't mapped out, and it's going to happen entirely serendipitously by itself, right? So everything changed. The destination was the same, but then the path changed, the maps changed. I would speak to people, they would give me suggestions. I'd plot those out in the map, and I'd start following that. And then something else would come up on the next place, and then I'd do something else. And, like, there was this sense of, I want to get to a certain location or a certain destination, but I also want to uncover or to allow things to happen that are better than what I can possibly want for myself.
Mm.
Right? I mean, it's so naive for me to think that I know what I want for myself. Like, it's so easy to believe that I know what I want, right? But the reality is, what I think I want, maybe just like 10% of what the entire spectrum of things that I can enjoy. And if I'm going to limit myself that, no, I want this and I only want this and nothing else, and I want it exactly the way I want it, well, that's cool. I mean, if your will is strong enough, you'll probably get exactly that because, it's not too hard. I mean, like, the universe isn't so mysterious at all. All you've got to do is just wish for it, and things really do happen.
Yeah.
But it's so limiting. I mean, it's so much more exploratory to allow things to happen, which could be far beyond anything that I ever imagined.
Which also requires that openness of being willing to play with whatever wants to happen. Uh, I had an experience um just a few days ago. I have a small Patreon community for Tankesbjerg where we do a monthly Zoom call. And the topic for this month was Am I Enough? Which I is like, yeah, this is going to be an interesting topic. And, it is like these conversations, like you don't know what happens. It's usually not more than 10 people who come, but we always have the most enormously rewarding, uh, flowing, meandering conversations where, but this one was probably the most profound one for me. And I've been doing this for a year and a half. Yeah, a year and a half. Wow. Where it became so clear that this was a question that opened up so much, and that each and every one of us who partook comes at this question from a very specific place. And with everybody sharing, it just opened up this enormous experience of there is no way I could have made that happen if I had tried to, okay, here's the agenda. We start with a little round and then everybody can answer the question and then we do this and then we have, it's like there's no way I could have conceived of what wanted to happen Tuesday night. But what wanted to happen was a profound, for me, really, really deep, a very emotional experience. But the ability of us all, I would say, uh, but of course also me for being, I am the host, regardless, I have opened the space to be able to take in these total opposites and, like you say, really play with it. When you say that, huh, I've never thought about that. You know, like, wow. And what does that open up in me? And, just really, like you say, bounce in between the, the different places of where people come at this question. It was fantastic. Um, so allowing for that, opening for that, being willing to play with whatever wants to happen. It does bring you rewards that are out of my ability to conceive of them. I couldn't have made that happen. It happens, it emerges. I can't make it because I wouldn't know how to make that because I wouldn't, I come from my place to this question, am I enough? I didn't know that there were so many other places you could come to this question to too. It's like I could see mine and a few others in my head because I've spoken to people, but there were viewpoints that open up here that were just beyond my imagination. Um,
And that's how we grow, right? Because it's just as this sense of expanding horizons. It's like the horizon is only as far as the eye can see, right? That's nowhere close to how far we can actually go because that's infinite. It's there's no end to it. And if we're going to be stuck with as far as we can
I
see
can
for
see.
ourselves, man, I mean, like it's like we're limiting the playground to our own, you know, experience of. It's almost like the whole social distancing thing, and it's
Yeah,
like 6 feet away. Is all I can see, is all I want to perceive is my kingdom. It's like, I mean, oh my God, there it goes again. The whole idea, like, this is my kingdom, right? It's only as far as you can see, it's only as far as you can plot on the map. And it's still not enough because you can always keep plotting more spaces on the map, right? But this idea of infinite space within, like how little a game am I playing if I'm just going to start occupying little points on the map and expanding my borders, a tiny little map, when the idea of infinity is right inside of me, right? Like our thoughts can go beyond anything we ever imagined. But the best of our attempts to possess land is just a little space on a map.
Mm.
It's such a little game to play. I mean, it seems like the most powerful game on the planet is occupying land. I'm going to take over, you know, Ukraine, Iraq, Vietnam. I'm going to take over all these places. I'm going to rule the entire world, right? Like, oh, well, I mean, like, what's happening inside of here, right? Like, I remember the story of um, I think it was Alexander who reached the borders of India and he wanted to like go in and try to annex India as well. And then he met these holy men, sadhus sitting on the banks of the river, just sunning themselves. And he was like, uh, "You got to move because me and my army have passed." He says, "It's not your land," and he says, "I can make it my land if I want." He says, "It's not even my land. It's not your land. I can sit wherever I like. You can't do anything, and I'm going to move because I'm sunning myself right." And he says, "You're just a naked old man. Like, you don't know anything. I owned, all of these armies. I've vanquished so many countries, and I'm now going to vanquish further." He says, you can't vanquish your own self. What are you doing vanquishing all these people, right? And there's some story about how he, predicts Alexander's death, etc., etc. But the point that he made was interesting about the fact that, at the end of the day, the the lands that you really want to conquer, the armies that you want to vanquish are right here, right? The belief that one has, the parts of one's perception that we want to conquer, that we want to overcome, that we want to, you know, possess, right?
Win.
Traits, yeah, win, right? Like charity begins at home, so does
Yeah.
conquest, I guess.
Yeah. Speaking about conquest, I have a question for you.
Hmm.
You say Bombay.
Hmm.
You don't say Mumbai.
Yeah.
You want to tell me why? What's the story? Cuz I have grown up saying Bombay, and then when I was there, which was, I worked with India 2007 till 11 or something. Then it was Mumbai. So I relearned, I offloaded Bombay and relearned Mumbai. And so now it's like if it's like, and I know there's a lot of, I know some of the stories, but I'm a little bit curious about about it, if you wanna share.
Interestingly, is like it's mostly a response to the anglicization of the names, right? Bombay is a name given by Britishers, and like same with Bangalore, Madras. All of these cities were names given by the Britishers because they couldn't pronounce the local name, right? So once at some point in recent history, people started waking up and said, "Oh, we should get back our original names," right? So Bombay became Mumbai again, and Madras became Chennai, Bangalore became Bengaluru. So they essentially reverted back to their non-anglicized names, and but in a sense, in the spirit of things, things haven't really changed, right? So in most cases, I just still stick to the old names just because I don't feel that there's any change just because the pronunciation or the spelling has changed on the map, on signboards, on the aircraft, uh, the airport rosters. Just
Mm.
because those have changed, I don't feel like a grand change in the spirit of the place or the people. So I'm not really too caught up on making the changes unless it's on like an official document and I have to follow rules. But in a sense, I haven't made that change in local parlance when I speak to people or when I'm thinking in my head, I haven't made the change.
So
So
you
more
say
often than not,
Madras and you say Bangalore, you say Bombay.
yeah,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm,
But in a conversation, if I'm in an interaction with people and things just, you know, I just go with what the majority have to say. I'm
mhm.
just like, okay, everyone's saying Chennai. And then,
Eh,
like, typically my mind works uh, very like chameleon. It kind of like just plays along with what's happening. Not because I'm trying to people please, but because it's just the path of least resistance, right? Unless I feel like I need to specifically make a point to a certain opinion or a viewpoint, I don't need to, you know, create conflict or
mm,
make a point just for the sake of it, right? That's how it is. But unless there's like a really important point to be made at that point, then I'll be like, okay, I'm not going to go along with what everyone's saying. But in most cases, I'm just like, if everyone's saying Chennai, okay, well, so be it. If everyone's saying Madras, okay, so be it. But if you really ask me for my opinion, I'll say Madras because it's just the name I grew up with in my head.
yeah,
And
yeah.
as most of us, it's like kind of like what we remember as what we play the games in our heads as kids. Those usually remain the games that we continue playing as adults, unless some sort of a traumatic or life altering incident changes perceptions. That's another reason I feel like play is so vital because, really speaking, most of our opinions and perceptions are not a result of collegiate level education, which supposedly is supposed to cement our opinions and perspective of life. But it's more of the things that happen at very early childhood, like anywhere between like 5 to 15 are the earliest years of you know strong molding of an adult's
Yeah, yeah.
you know perceptions and things. So I really don't spend much time beyond that. I'm constantly going back to that phase of my life where I look at how I lived and what I thought. And unless I see a need to specifically change that because circumstances have changed, I don't try to reprogram myself at all.
Cool. And it's fun. I have a friend who says that common sense, sunt förnuft in Swedish, common sense is basically just all of the um, um, preconceived notions that you've learned up until the age of 18 that you're then stuck with. And that's why what's common sense to me isn't common sense to you. And then I can go, what the fuck? Where's his common sense? Yeah, because I'm molded this way and you're molded in another way. And that's why there's no one common sense, because we all have those preconceived notions and like assumptions and whatnot. Um, yeah, fun. It's interesting. And I mean, because it's as a foreigner, it's like, again, it's like, where's the respect? What's the respectful thing to do? Do I say Bombay? Do I say Mumbai? Do I call it Beijing or Peking? Or, it's like, w- and I think these are part of the things that we're not supposed to talk about. So it's like, because of the fear of, it's like, it isn't play area. It's no, this is very, very serious. And damn you if you get it wrong, because then I can be offended but rather it's like to be able to have some fun with it, to play with it, to ask the questions, to hear, that's how interesting, to be allowed to put my foot in it now and again. Because that's how I learn. That's how I will calibrate again. Aha, bad idea to do that. Okay. No, um, yeah. You know what? We have had 5 conversations ready. I know, and it's just I don't know how I had the same feeling when season 1 was about to end. It's like, how am I gonna not continue to have these monthly conversations? But I know you won't go anyway, and I
Nope,
won't go anywhere either.
right
So,
here, ready to play.
yeah. Yeah. And that makes me so happy. I hope you check your email and check the doodle that I sent out because I wanna have a pod recording conversation with all of us from season 2, if I can.
Wow.
I did that with season 1. It turned into two episodes because we couldn't all fit in on one date. But it's a really, really lovely experience to get a little bit of reflection of the different, kind of like the question of am I enough? It's like different perspective. What's it been like? So check that, please.
It's a
And
cross cultural exchange between podcasters across.
yes, yes,
Brilliant.
precisely, precisely. So do that and make a great day.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy that we could have this conversation, especially the difficult subject that we tackled, that we played with, because it's exactly these difficult subjects of, great weight, gravity that we need to play frivolously with, right? Like, play isn't meant to be played frivolously. Play is meant to be played seriously, right?
Yeah,
It feels like a frivolous activity, but we need to start playing with these subjects that seem to be like, just
yeah.
because it's a matter of life and death doesn't mean we can't play with it. I'm glad we did.
I am
Thank you so much.
too. And it feels like it was very opportune with what's been going on today. So thank you for that. It helps me also again open up to see that, oh yeah, some of the things that we take for granted as normal really aren't. They're the weird things. It's like, so yeah, have fun.
Thank you
Yes,
so
big
much.
hug. Big hug.
Big, big, big hug.
Big
See you
hug.
soon.
Bye. Yep.